Welcome everybody to Wednesday Women's Wine Time, a chance to connect, a chance to spend time with one another, and also an excuse to drink wine midweek. Tonight we have an incredible guest. She is an absolute inspiration. I cannot wait for you to meet her and for you to hear her story. It is just an amazing story. I've just finished reading her very first book that she published, which was Beyond Abuse, and I can't recommend it enough. It is definitely a must read for everyone, particularly those who have, experienced domestic violence or know somebody who has. So welcome, Di.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you. And hi, ladies.
Oh, thank you for joining us tonight. I very, very much appreciate your time. So Di, tonight, I guess I just want to welcome you, and obviously, can you tell us a little bit about what you do now with women?
Thank you, Jess, and hello, ladies. My passion is to see women be fully self-expressed. Sure, the first book was called Beyond Abuse, and back in that time, that was my early life, not my married life, my early life. Suppression is such a deep gouging thing. Like when you get to the point where you can't speak out, where you can't move, where you don't have any self-worth, you don't have any self-respect, you don't have any self-belief. And it's a terrible way to live. So if I can show women that they can step beyond that, I think my job is done. And, we can be suppressed for any reason. It doesn't have to be abuse. It could be you're downcast at work. It could be you've had a relationship breakdown. It could be you've had a financial ruin and you're trying to start over and you're full of embarrassment. Maybe you've lost someone, as in gone to heaven. And I know the struggle I went through after my late husband passed away, and the journey that I had to travel to create a life of my own, because I didn't realise how dependent I was on Les until he had gone. So it was a big, long journey. And the experiences that I've gained through speaking, through coaching, through life are just invaluable to be able to help other people and to be a role model. Because, now I stand for Your Voice Matters, as you can see behind me. And your voice, being able to speak your truth with grace and power, is so strong, because never, ever has there been a time where your voice and your story has been more important. I mean, holy cow, look at what's happened this year. First we had bushfires, then we had floods, and then we've had COVID. And it's really knocked society around. And I think it's affected so many people. And I've always been of the belief that if we help the women, if we help them to be strong, if we help them to be able to speak out, to express their emotions in healthy ways, then they will set the scene for children. And I think women will then also set the scene for men. And if we don't do something about it, because just look at the rates of domestic violence, they're rising, they're not falling. And there's been a sharp rise in it over the COVID period, because obviously people are shut up and shut together, because under normal circumstances, he goes to work, she goes to work, the kids go to school. But during isolation, everyone was thrust together. And in that isolation, it would have been the perfect way for an abuser to shut off contact, because she would have had the wife would have had absolutely no outlet. And I'm not saying it's all restricted to women, because stuff happens to men too. So in book 2 of mine, I have stories in there from men, as well as my own story and some other women's stories. But I think the difference is with abuse of women, because of the physical strength and disparity between the sexes, that often leads in death. I think on the men's abusive side, it leads more towards depression, and I think it really contributes to the suicide rate, because they get destroyed emotionally and psychologically, whereas the man's more inclined to go for the physical and destroy a woman in that way. So, if we can make those changes, if we can educate young girls to leave the table when respect is no longer being served, then I think we're going to start to see a change in relationships. When we educate women, when we educate couples to show respect to each other, you just listen when you go out shopping, you go into the supermarket and you hear the way couples speak to each other. It's no wonder that our relationships don't survive, because I think there's nothing more beautiful than to see a happy couple and see how they communicate, how they relate to each other, how they speak to each other, and how they speak about each other to other people. I just think there's nothing more beautiful than seeing that. And that makes you then a role model for future generations. Apart from, well, Trish isn't in my age group either, but the rest of you ladies are very young. So, you know, you're in a very different position. But from someone from my point of view, I can be that role model for future generations, for my granddaughters, because I, like I said, my stepchildren were aged 10 to 16 when we got married and I was 24. So my granddaughters are in their 30s. And I can be that role model for them. They can see, they know what I've been through. They watched me go through the journey. They learned when they were young what had happened to me, because it was 2006 when I first published. And that was when nobody knew that story apart from my late husband. So it was a huge thing. I think probably the biggest thing that I had to do when I published the book was to go to the family and say, this is what happened to me. And I had amazing support through that happening. And I think that's such a lesson, that we think that, you know, challenges that happen to us because of the shame and the fear of rejection holds us back. But when you step up and say, this is what happened to me, and this is who I've become because of it, and people sit up and take notice, and you will get them on side. They will be there for you. And my goodness, I've had so many friends who've been there for me, and Trish is one of them, who've watched me go through my journey. They've observed me. And I didn't cope well in those early days. It took me years to find my feet. And I quite understand when people are struggling. I know what a chaotic life is like. I know what it's like not to be able to speak out and say what you need to say. So all of my writing and everything that I write about, everything that I teach, I've lived through. I don't talk about things that I haven't lived through. I don't talk about finance because finance is not my deal. I talk about relationships. I talk about confidence. I talk about your voice matters, because they're all things that I was deprived of until I found a way around them. So book 1, Beyond Abuse, was my story. Book 2 was the extension with men and women's stories in it. And book 3, Speak Out, is about suppression to expression in 9 vital steps. So showing you how to step up and speak out. It's a whole different story, because I don't want to spend my life being known as the woman who was abused. There's a whole lot more to me than that. So I'm not sure where we want to go with that now, Jess, and I'm happy for any of the ladies. Nothing is off the table for discussion or questions with me. You can ask me anything you like. Oh, and I think, just before I just do want to add one thing. I actually had 2 children out of wedlock. I was a victim of pack rape as a teenager. And then I spent I had a violent alcoholic dad. That was the upbringing. And then I spent 5 years after that first birth letting people use and abuse me because I didn't know any different. And I fell pregnant a second time. So both of those children were adopted out. And through my life, I'd always said and thought to myself, I will not reach out. If they come to me, that's good. When I wrote the first book, I still felt like that. When I wrote the second book, I still felt like that. But the day it went live on Amazon, something went off in my head and I thought, I'm ready. I'm ready to search. And in 2 short months, I had found and met my daughter, and she lives in another suburb in Brisbane. Wow. That, you know, has been such a journey and such an amazing result for my life. it's just, you know, sometimes I just can't find the words to express how I felt at that time, to be able to connect and to find my daughter. It was amazing. Okay, Jess, that's what I wanted to add.
Well, Di, I kind of want to just take a step back and ask you, you know, you did have an alcoholic father. You know, you were severely suppressed as a child. You were, you know, you weren't allowed to have a voice. Can you, you know, perhaps explain a little further, like what life was like for you back then, and then, you know, in the lead up to what happened? You know, it just seemed from reading your book Beyond Abuse that at every step throughout, you know, your adolescence, your childhood, and then your adolescence, that you were constantly, it was just you know, through life experience or things that happened to you, that you were constantly made to feel like your voice didn't matter. You know, you were not you know, you were a woman, you were not entitled to have a voice, you weren't allowed to express yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you know, your childhood and what sort of happened? Because it's not, you know, you are a phenomenal woman today, but this was a journey.
Oh, yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, as a child in a violent alcoholic household, my life was just filled with fear. So there's very little joy. You know, people talk about their childhood, and there's very little joy from my early life. The joy that's there was my mum reading stories to me and visiting my maternal grandma. They were the two real highlights, and I had an uncle, mum's brother. So they were the three things that were my bits of outlet, because that suppression was just incredible. And the violence was carried out against my mother, and it was an implied threat that if I didn't toe the line, then that would happen to me too. But I grew up thinking that that's how people lived. I thought that that's how women were going to be treated in our family. When I went to school and I could see kids, and I knew that these other children had happy homes and they went places and they did things and they went to dancing and da-da-da-da-da. And I thought that happiness, I thought that confidence was for other people. I didn't think that was for me. So that's why I had no self-confidence. I had no self-belief. I had no self-esteem growing up. So at age 15, when I went to a dance and, you know, I had my eye on this guy, and I thought the sun, the moon and the stars shone out of him. He offered to drive me home from the dance, and I accepted. But what I didn't know was, when we went out to the car, that he had two guys on the floor in the back, and we didn't go home. So that was the pack raid. So that didn't do anything for my self-esteem either. And then then through the pregnancy, I was dismissed away, I was set away from society as a housemaid for a doctor in Brisbane, in a suburb out towards Kenmore, somewhere it was. And in those days, that was all bushland. The doctor who I went to work for, he was my attending doctor. So my prenatal care was, you'll find out when you get there. When I had to go to the surgery for a visit, I got ushered in the back door because I was an embarrassment and I wasn't allowed to come in the front door. I never left their property. I was the carer for their two young children and the general housemaid. It was one of those L-shaped sort of houses, and my room was out the back. The doctor tried to get into my room at night. So even though it was summer, I had to keep the room locked up because I knew that no one was going to believe me. So none of these things were going to give me self-belief or self-esteem. And it wasn't until I went nursing that I started to pick up some skills. And then I went from, my goodness, this is confidence. Whoopee, isn't this great stuff? And I went straight to arrogance. So the first night I was a senior nurse. My God, I was excited because I had a junior to boss around. How good was this? So it was an evening shift in an aged person's ward. And my junior nurse, she said to me, what do we do? They had their dinner, and she said, what do we do now? And I said, we clean their teeth and put them to bed. She said, oh, okay. So off I go, strutting around, you know, Madam Wonderful. And a little while later, she came up and tapped me on the shoulder. And when I turned round, she said, I've cleaned their teeth. And she had a sponge bowl with 40 pair of teeth in it. She had collected everyone's teeth and cleaned them in one dish. Can you imagine how we spent the rest of the night? Old people's teeth don't fit anyway. So I was sort of dazed, shuffling. Oh no, Mary's got gold in her teeth. Oh no, they're not hers. They're Rachel's. It was an absolute disaster, and it's such a perfect example of how when we're deprived of something and we gain a little bit, we hop right to the other side. If I had been watching her, if I had been doing my duties as a senior nurse instead of being Madam Wonderful, I would have seen what she was doing and it wouldn't have happened. So that bit of confidence grew within me. And then I met my husband because, you know, at both of those births, the welfare people told me I was a disgrace to myself, the country, the universe and everything in between, that no decent man would want me. So I should go nursing, get out of society's way. No decent man will want you. And then I met my husband. Well, because he had the 4 children aged 10 to 16 and I was 24, and I was all full of cockiness from nursing, I thought, well, how hard can it be? It'll just be like running a hospital ward. Well, no, it's not. Because kids don't do as you say, you know, patients do as you say. So that was a really sharp upbringing, and then we had a son the following year. Well, within about 3 or 4 years, my confidence had plummeted again, even although I had such a supportive husband. And I was a member of the Business and Professional Women's Club in Mackay, and they were looking for, Toastmasters was just starting up there, and they came around to service clubs and asked would they like to sponsor someone for a year. And they said to me, that's a great idea, go do it. So off I went, and 42 years later, I'm still there. So, you know, Les encouraged me, that's my late husband, he encouraged me every step of that way to step up, and I became the woman that I was because he was in the corporate sugar world. So, and all of his mates and counterparts and their wives, they were more Les's age than my age. So I was like the young pup. And that sort of put me down a bit because they looked down their nose at me because I wasn't mature, and I didn't dress quite like they did because, God help, it was the 1970s. I'm tall, I was skinny as a rake in those days. I was all legs and I had long hair. So, you know, I didn't fit the profile of the mature, conservative sugar industry wife. So that took a little bit of battering as well. So it was Toastmasters that gave me the power. It gave me the confidence in myself and the self-belief that I at last got the power to stand up and speak. And today, that's what I love to do, to be able to see other women shine, to be able to step up. Because I see a difference, and I've seen it so many times with women who've had a supportive, loving upbringing and told they could do anything. They have that mindset, which someone who comes through an abusive background doesn't have. So I have to be very careful with my self-esteem and my self-support, because it can still get nudged aside, and it still does. So I have to be on the ball because it's a whole different ball game, and until you've been there, you really don't get it. So everything, like I say, everything I teach, everything I do, I've lived through. And if I can make a difference to 1, 10, 100 women, then my life work is done. And I've certainly educated my granddaughters, my adult granddaughters, in the process of leave that table when respect is no longer being served. And I think it's a great motto to live your life by.
Wow, what a story, Di. And it certainly, you know, your book had me just, you know, I guess because I knew you reading your book, I could hear your voice in my head, and it was just wonderful to just read your book and have you there right beside me. It's, you know, it was a very easy read, and I really couldn't put it down, and it was a phenomenal story, how you I don't know, you seem to have just this drive and this motivation. You know, some women would have just given up, just thrown their hands in the air and said, oh, I just, you know, this was my plot in life. I can't go on any longer. What motivated you? What gave you the drive to strive to be a better person?
I think the turning point, after the first pregnancy, and like I said, I used people to use and abuse me. I had this boyfriend, and I was in Maryborough nursing, and he was in Brisbane. And I'd come down for the weekend, and we were at his parents' place, and his father came home drunk, didn't like what was for dinner, hit his mother and knocked her across the room. When she stood up, she looked at me and she said, I deserved that. I didn't cook his dinner right.
Oh.
And something just went off in my head, and I looked at it and I thought, that will be me. Not happening. So I left that weekend. I went back to Maryborough and back to nursing, and I never went back. And he was actually the father of the second child. I never told him. I was never going to give him any excuse to come within cooey of me. And it was a hard road because he caused a lot of issue, because in those days nurses had to live in nurses' quarters, and he ran the hospital and he got me into all sorts of trouble, but there was no way. I had made that decision by then. I don't know what got into me, but it was just like the thing that I wasn't going to be that woman. There had to be a better way, and I was going to have to find it. And I thought that I would find it through nursing, because their voices, the welfare workers' voices were ringing in my ears. You're stupid, you're worthless, you're not worth anything, you're a disgrace to everyone. No decent man will want you. Get out in society, go nursing, stay nursing, because that's your only future. And I thought that was going to be it. So I sought and grew to a great degree through that. But I became the woman I am through being with my husband, my late husband. He was a delight.
Can you tell us a little bit more about him? Obviously, he's been a huge part of your life. How long were you married? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about him.
We were married 31 years, and we met. He was a blind date back in my training days. I
love this story.
The nurses' quarters is a bit like the bulk store for a date. So travelling salesmen, sporting people, guys in town, whoever, they'd ring the quarters and say, anyone want to go on a date? And me being all officious and efficient, I used to send them off with a flea in there. And then one day I answered the phone, the outside phone, and this polite voice said that he was in town for a technologist conference, sugar technologist conference. It was the opening night, and was there someone there who might like to go with him for dinner? And I thought, oh. And I opened my mouth to give him an earful like I normally did, and yes came out. So when I got off the phone and went and told the girls, they said, you're going on a blind date, you? And I said, I am. So we did what we always did. This was our way of protecting each other. And nurses' quarters was the old-fashioned 2-storey timber building in a U shape. So there was a circular driveway in front of that U shape, and the front door was right in the middle of the U. So we would turn the lights off upstairs, sit on the veranda and look out through the railing and watch. First observation, was it an okay car or was it a bomb? Was he driving straight? Was he drunk? When he got out of the car, we could peer over the edge and see. Was he well dressed? And was he drunk? Was he walking straight? And on that premise, the Chinese whispers would just go down the veranda. He's all right. He's all right. Yeah. And on that premise, off you would go. If someone turned up that we didn't like the look of and we thought was sus, we'd say that she got called into work. And that was our way of protecting each other. And honestly, nobody got into trouble in the time that I was there through going out on a blind date in my 4 years of training. So we went out the first night, and it was a lovely night and mixing, and had lovely dinner, etc. And then he asked me to go out for dinner the next night, and thought, holy cow, this guy can afford to feed me. Might be trouble in this.
There's not much of you.
He was there for for a week, so we couldn't go out every night because we had nurses' rules. We had to be in bed by 10 o'clock, lights out at 10:30, and you're allowed one late pass a week till midnight, and once a month you could have a ball pass till 2 a.m. So then, and I was in theatre and on call, so on the night you're on call you couldn't leave the quarters anyway, so I was sitting outside in the car and someone was answering the phone for me and said I was in the loo and come out and got me. So, within that first week, it was pretty obvious, and we decided, well, yeah, we reckon that we might sort of get married. And I said, well, I've actually got something to tell you. And he said, well, I've got something to tell you too. And I said, oh, really? He said, you go first. So I told him about the children, because I wouldn't have married without being honest with my partner. And then when I'd finished, he said, well, I've been married before and I've got 4 kids aged 10 to 16. And I gulped and I thought, oh, okay, that's obviously the package. And it went from there. And, it hasn't been all roses, and it's not all roses, but that's life. I've done the best, and I can look back and see that I could have done things much better. But I dealt with life with the skills I had at that time. I know better now, but you can't go back. But you can make a difference with where you are today. So does that make sense? So we had 31 years together, and they were amazing years. Amazing years. Les had a lot of ill health. The last 20 years he had a lot of heart issues, and then the last 3 months he had lung cancer, and that was just a total disaster. And then he went to heaven. And it was that, and then began my whole, and that was 2002, and that began, and that created that whole thing then for me, where I just fell completely apart. I couldn't get my life together. And it was a huge struggle to get back on my feet. Yeah.
But that was another chapter of your life, really, wasn't it?
Chapter, yeah. I lost 15 kilos in the first year. I was like a yard and a half of fencing wire. I'm about 5'10", and I dropped to 51 kilos. And a friend came around, and I was sitting on the veranda, and John said to me, put your shoes on. And he spoke to me he said he spoke to me 3 times, and I didn't even hear him. And he said, it's time, I'm taking you to the doc. So he rang, took me there, and my doc wasn't available, and I had to see somebody else. And she was a mature lady. I was still nursing in those days. And so I knew her from coming to the hospital, and I was blubbering on about my issues. And she looked at me and she said, don't you matter? And I bristled and said, of course I do. And she said, well, you're not behaving like it. So that was the wake-up call and the turning point for me to go home. Of course, I burst into tears, and, there was, not at all. But that was the turning point. I went home and thought about it and started to write about it, because I was journaling big time. And that was the turning point. That was the turning point. And then it was a long, slow climb, and then we're up and down. I mean, it's not it's not a straight line. We just don't go like that in life. It wiggles, and mine wiggled a lot. And I'm here today. I'm alive. I'm well. I'm out there. I have a beautiful new partner in my life today, and I've got a pretty good life.
Yeah, and you are, you are bringing so much to people's lives with what you do, and through your story, and through, it can't be easy to disclose and to share your story. I mean, I know me personally, yes, I have shared my story, but, sharing it again and again, it is still sad. Sometimes it is, you do move past it, and you do gain insight and things, but it's still your part of your essence and your being. And so I just want to say, when I read your story, like, I had so much respect for you. Before I read your story, I only knew a very minimal, but once I read your book, it was just like, oh my goodness, this woman has so much substance and so much to offer, and so much courage and so much strength. And it was just, I was like, oh, and I know her, It was just, yeah, I was blown away. I really enjoyed reading your book. So I just really want to say thank you, Di, for having the courage and the strength to release it into the world. Yeah.
It was very emotional when I first wrote the book, and when I started to speak about it, and I wrote the story at Toastmasters publicly. And there were people, I'd been a member for 28 years at that time, and there were people in that room that had known me for 28 years, and there was people in there that had known me for 5 minutes, and I had no idea what response I would get. And I was blown away by the support that happened. And then I put the story into a speech and put it into a speech contest, and that's it in the back of the book, which you would have read.
Yes, right, I did, yeah.
And it went through 3 levels. Now, to tell that story, I used to get upset and emotional telling it. So what I did, I didn't want to give my story away to somebody else. So I thought, well, how can I do that? And I thought, well, hidden away that never gets used, my middle name. So in the beginning, I tell the story as Mari. And then when I get to the happy point where Les comes into the picture, I said, well, how do I know so much about it, my friend Mari? Because it's me, Diana Marie. And that helped me to be able to share the story. It removed me enough that I could have the emotional strength and the spiritual strength to get up and share my story. I don't need to do that today, but I needed to do that in the beginning.
So can you tell us a little bit about, you know, we've obviously talked about your early years and your book Beyond Abuse. What motivated you to write your second book, which was Speak Out, From Suppressed to Expressed in 9 Vital Steps, which is that one there. Yeah, what motivated you to write your third book? I mean, I love the cover. I think, you know, that if you guys can see there, that is a photo of Di when she was a little girl. I mean, I'll let you explain, Di, why you popped that on the front cover of your book.
To show that state of suppression, you can see that I'm a sad, downtrodden little girl. There was scarcely an ounce of happiness there. And I got a hiding the day that photo was taken because I wouldn't smile. Of course, that helped. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, why did you write the book? Yeah. I mean, you'd already written 2 books. What was the motivation for the third one?
It evolved, and Trish Springsteen's partly to blame for this one, because Trish and Deb Fay, who some of you may know, she's my publisher, they put together a function called Get Known, Be Seen, which was an author expo. And they invited 10 authors, and we all had 10 minutes to speak. So, and I was one of those authors that was invited. So I gave my 10-minute presentation, and so did the other ladies. And at the end of the day, Deb came up with a proposal for anyone who wanted to join in. She was going to start write a book club where you wrote your own book, you're writing your own story, but you're doing it within a group environment. So every week we had a Zoom call, which was all full of support, and it was just amazing. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'd like to be in that. Oh yeah, let's have a crack at that. And I was even a bit outspoken, thought I might even do 2 books this year, but of course that didn't happen. A bit of life intervened, and the death of my sister, and there was lots of things happened in that year. So 1 book evolved, and that was it. So it was Speak Out, and it's very different to the other 2 books in the point of view that it's a combination of storytelling, strategies, and action steps. So it's something that it's not like a story that you pick up and read from front to back. It's a set of all these things, so that if something's going on in your life, you think, oh, what did I say about that? So you can go back to that chapter and see these strategies. And I put several strategies in there because everything doesn't work for the same person. But by the same token, you have different requirements at different periods of your growth. So what might not relate to you today, in a couple of years you might be in a different position, and you go back and have a look at it and you think, oh, well, you look at it very differently. So those strategies are something that reaches a really wide range. And then action steps of the how-to and a story to support each of the chapters. So there's one about dissolving your negative emotions. There's one about journaling. There's one about embracing change, stepping onto a bigger stage, what can be holding you back. And the final chapter is your voice is a mirror for self-awareness. So it's a whole gamut of things combined all into one. So it's a resource book.
And so it really, you know, it is really for people who are who have experienced depression in their lives and who have been told that their voice doesn't matter.
It's not necessarily, because it's really for anyone who wants to be more fully self-expressed, because sometimes it doesn't, your voice doesn't have to be suppressed because of abuse. You can be doing it yourself. It can be from work. It can be from something else.
Yeah, and mindsets as well.
Mindset. So, you know, if you want to be stepping out, or if you've had a life challenge and you're starting over, it's an invaluable set of tools, because you've got all these examples and stories and action steps and strategies to try and find one that suits you, so that you can step up and along.
So Di, why does your voice matter?
Because I think everyone's voice matters, and I think that women have been suppressed throughout the ages. It's just been an ongoing thing. And I think for women to be able to take their place, to be able to stand up and use their voice with truth and power, then I think that we are going to see a very different world. Everything that's going on now, if we can have women who come from that point of strength, from that point of connection, from the point of care, compassion and empathy, then I think it's going to build a much stronger world. And we can do that by working together, not by being isolated. And that's the power of groups, like your little group here and other groups that all of us are involved in. When we draw on and share and grow together, it's going to make such a difference in society when we can be that person, when we can be role models for who's coming behind us. You younger ladies are role models for your children and for the community in large. So, you know, it's really very important for women to have that strength, have that self-belief, and to be able to speak, grow, and be proud of who they are. Because, my goodness, we're just a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of power. And when we learn to deliver that with grace and empathy, then just look what a difference we can make.
Great things happen. Wow. Ladies, I would love to open this up right now to you. If you have any questions for Di, she did say that she's an open book. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask Di now.
Where can I buy your books?
The original book through me, because I've never put it up on the website, because I sort of thought that it wasn't going to happen. And the second one is available either through the website or through me. Okay. So I'll leave the details with Jess and she can pass them on.
I noticed that, excuse me, working in communities, we use the term post-traumatic growth, and that's not something you said at all. And I do find it very clinical. Is that a term that you've come across and purposely don't use when you're speaking?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay away from the trauma. And like I said, neither do I want to be known as the woman who was abused, because there's a whole lot more to me than that. And that's why I really wanted to shift the focus in book 3, that, yeah, there is that trauma there. And I don't use it. Yeah, it is a deliberate ploy that I'm focusing more today on the positives, on the fact that you can move forward. It doesn't matter what happens to you. We do have the ability to make the change, to step forward and to be who we need to be. Does that answer your question, Jenny?
I think it sounds a lot nicer. We have the ability to step forward. Like, that is so much nicer than post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Like, when you're speaking to someone that has been through traumas in their lives, it's such a nicer approach to say that.
Yeah. And, you know, you can people who've been abused consider I could have spent my life sitting in the corner saying, you know, my dad didn't like me, yakety yakety, blah blah blah. I've chosen not to. I didn't want to be there, and the only way to be there is to step up, step out, and do something.
And I'm so grateful you did, Di.
Thank you. And when you do that, you find that there's an amazing amount of support out there. Absolutely amazing. The strength and the compassion, the help that I've received from so many women in this world. And like I said, and Trish is one of them. She's been an amazing support to me in many ways over quite a number of years.
Yeah, it's you know, when you do step out, often it's not just, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's not really, you know, you have the courage to step out, but then it's a whole community of women that props you up to keep you there.
Yeah.
You know, it's it does take that courage and that vulnerability to step out, but yeah, it does, and the support is phenomenal when you know, like what Rhonda says, when you turn your pain into power, and it's a beautiful thing. Is there any other questions, ladies, that you would like to ask tonight before we wrap up?
I'm just going to acknowledge a very awesome lady. Thank you, Di.
Thank you.
Will you be my best friend?
Who said that?
Di will be anybody's friend. Di will be your friend from now until ever and ever. When Di talks about grace, she is the epitome of grace. If you want to know a graceful lady, you've got one right here.
That's lovely.
Grace lady.
Thank you.
You are very inspiring.
Thank you, Jenny. But it just does show that, you know, we really can step forward. We really can make a life for ourselves. But you have to make the decision and the choice to do it and carry it through. And there's good days and bad days. I still have days where I want to kick the wall. But that's okay. I'll get over it by the next day.
Oh, it's been an absolute delight, Di.
Thanks, Jess.
I've just loved every minute of it. You just give off this energy, and it's just I could sit and talk to you all day, to be honest.
You're my best friend.
Di, can you just tell us what is your website, where people can get in contact with you, and any offerings that you've got at the moment that perhaps you know, either the women on tonight or people watching the replay might be interested in?
Okay, thanks, Jess. My website is diriddell.com, and like I said, book 3 is available through the website. Book 1 is available through me. In the last couple of weeks, I've run 2 masterclasses, which I will probably run again, and that was how to speak confidently without fear, and that's basically about transforming your fears. And I'm just about to start a 6-week program on a confident speakers program, looking at delivery and power in your voice. And that's again available through me. And Jess will have my detail, and my email is Di.
You better hurry up. I'm turning that off in 5 minutes.
Oh, hang
what
on.
happened in 5 minutes?
Sorry. Wait. Hang on.
Sorry, what was your email?
Sorry, what was your email address, Di?
Di@diriddell.com.
Excellent. So Di, I'll just show your books again to everybody. That is the first one, Beyond Abuse. Di's second book is obviously, can we get that through your website? Through you? Or it's through Amazon?
I'm having a huge issue with the lady who published it and is supposed to be promoting it. I believe that it comes up on Amazon as out of print, but you can still get the ebook.
Okay, the ebook.
Yeah, the ebook. You get the
because
ebook
that would be an interesting read too, because it's got men's, like men's perspective as well as women's perspective. I mean, domestic violence, I just want to say, does not just affect women. You know, it does affect men. And unfortunately, yeah, that's right. And your third book, which has only just been really released last November, wasn't it? And that was Speak Out, from Suppress to Express in 9 Vital Steps. So that's Di's third book. And you said that you have the class, and I might put a link at the bottom of this where you can get in touch with Di. Di, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've just loved every minute of it. And you are a true inspiration, overcoming all that you've overcome. You know, you could have very easily chosen to just take a back seat, hidden in your corner, and you didn't. And you are touching people in so many, you know, from a very deep level. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies. And thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Di.
It was lovely guest. It was a privilege to be your guest this evening.
Oh, thank you. So ladies, next week is going to be run a little bit differently. I had a conversation with Jenny today, and I had a bit of a light bulb moment. So next week we are going to be talking about all things self-love, developing that deep self-love within each of us. I'm going to be running that one, which is really exciting, also a little bit nerve-wracking. And I've also got a really special announcement next week. So you want to stay tuned for that one. It's really exciting. I've been working really hard on it, and it is very intuitive and very deeply, deeply felt. So I would be honoured if you would join me next week for that huge announcement. And in the next couple of weeks, I have some really awesome guests. I have Deb Fay, who obviously we mentioned earlier tonight. She is my publisher. She is also Di's publisher. She is a very close friend of Trisha's, who's also published some of Trisha's books. So if you have a story inside you that you are looking to get published, you won't want to miss Deb. And we also have one of my very nearest and dearest souls. She is like a soul sister to me, Marnie Kent. She is releasing her book in a couple of weeks. I have read the book. It is phenomenal. So she will be one of our guests in the next coming weeks as well. So Women's Wine Time, 7 p.m. every Wednesday night. If you want to get in touch with me, you can. If you'd like to be a guest or you want the link to join us live, it's info@JessSermak, JessSermak.com. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's just been an absolute honour. I look forward to this time every single week to drink wine, to connect with other beautiful and inspiring women. So thank you guys. Until next week, much love, sending blessings, love, light. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.